Both girls wrapped in towels after a bath, showing their alluring figure and skin. Sumeo, touching her own hair at the back playfully, longed for few more hours in the bath, by Yuyu while clinging on to the towel with her right hand, and her left hand playing with her hair, in a grumpy but charming way told the protagonist that his foundation at present was weak, but she would teach him the devil cultivation method when an appropriate time comes. The protagonist nodded in positive anticipation that he would not disappoint either of them and would polish himself well. A shout echoed outside the room. It was the protagonist's father, calling out to his son and rushing in with tears in his eyes asking whether he was all right. Both the girls quickly got themselves absorbed by the ring in panic, worriedly asked the protagonist if he was affected by the dead chi gathered at the Immortal Devil Cliff, while also adding that he came to the protagonist as soon as he heard that the protagonist had arrived back from the Immortal Devil Cliff. The protagonist in panic conveyed that he was fine. Sumeo spoke telepathically, assuring that both of them were back inside the storage ring and the protagonist's father will not be able to detect them. The protagonist's father, in a strong, commanding but caringly, examined whether the protagonist had sustained any injury by holding his hand. Then, with widened eyes and surprised, was able to detect that his son had a spiritual vein. The protagonist, in acknowledgement, stated Hell Spirit Grass was worthy of its reputation as a 1,000-years-old spiritual herb, mentioning that the risk was worth it. His father, with tears of joy, nodded in agreement. The protagonist encouraged his father to compete for the position of patriarch in the family, believing in his success. The protagonist's father, then in positive agreement, attributing it to as God's will. With positive vibe, the duo, father and son, laughed, stating that they would let the Shen family see as to how the duo becomes the new leaders of the Shen family. A week after, at the Spirit Dan Pavilion, the protagonist seems to be engrossed in his thoughts, reflecting at how he had practiced and was also able to control the fire of the true chi proficiently, and also thought that just as Sister Sumeo suggested that if he wanted to improve his power quickly he had to rely on refining elixirs too. A pill caught his eyes. It was Peiyuan Body Dan, costing 5,000 large spirit stones. The protagonist almost wept at his inability to afford even the herbs to make some pills. Sumeo, inside the storage ring, telepathically spoke up, reprimanding the protagonist that if he wasn't able to afford the herbs, he could grow them himself. The protagonist, feeling uneasy, then repeated her word, asking whether she was joking with him, as it takes years to grow herbs. Sumeo said that the said duration was for common people, saying she had her own methods. The protagonist, after agreeing, then approached the salesperson asking whether the store had seedling of azure spirit grass and blood element flower, demanding 5 of each. The person behind the counter asked the protagonist to wait as he fetches the mentioned seeds. Behind the protagonist, 2 figures approached. It was Shen Xiang, a member of the Shen family who had also earlier bullied the protagonist, and Hua Yunxin, daughter of the governor of Wohu City. Shen Xiang, scornfully addressing the protagonist as the waste of Shen family, asked whether he was buying herbs for his health. Hua Yunxin added, while clarifying, if it wasn't Shen Xiang, the protagonist, and commenting that it was an embarrassment for Shen family to have an eldest grandson as him. The protagonist, without giving any attention to their mockery, simply glanced at them and ignored. Hua Yunxin, unable to ignore the non-responding attitude of the protagonist, stirred up the situation by turning towards Shen Xiang, asking as to how could a trash ignore Shen Xiang like this. Shen Xiang, trying to avoid trouble, asked the salesperson to kindly hurry. Shen Xiang, with annoyance in his face, asked whether the protagonist was itching for a fight again, then proceeded to strike the protagonist with Tianyang Palm, while the protagonist stood with his back towards Shen Xiang. As the attack landed, the protagonist, with lightning speed, avoided the attack. The attack destroyed the reception table. Shen Xiang, in surprise, asked how the protagonist was able to dodge it. The protagonist then responded that Shen Xiang only trained his true chi and lacked in physical training, and asked that with his speed, how Shen Jinhua expected to beat anyone. Shen Jinhua with qi in his fist exclaimed that, "The protagonist's turn hasn't arrived to be proud yet." The fist with qi looking like a fist of fire approached the protagonist. The protagonist simply caught with his hand with no effort. Shen Jinhua admonishing the protagonist action questioned as to how the protagonist had dared to challenge him and also conformingly asked whether all of the bones on the protagonist's hand had broken. The protagonist with annoyance answered that he had thought that Shen Jinhua was just physically weak, but it turned out that Shen Jinhua's true qi was also useless, surprising Shen Jinhua. The protagonist with his palm open towards Shen Jinhua asked him to witness true qi. Blazing bright as the sun? Shen Jinhua scared questioned as to how a trash like the protagonist could muster such qi. Hua Yunxin, unable to bear the hot flaming aura, asked Zhenhua to teach the protagonist a lesson, instead of staring blankly. A voice loudly spoke from the room above, proclaiming that this was the Spirit Dan Hall and questioned who had dared to fight inside. The protagonist was quick to apologize while stating his name, saying that he did not mean to offend him, adding that his younger brother in the family branch was incompetent and messing around, so he was taking the initiative to discipline him. The man then stated the situation as being their family business and asking why had they dared to disturb the master of Spirit Dan in the hall. While he was making the pills, the protagonist, turning towards Shen Jinhua, said that he would let him go, and if Shen Jinhua was not convinced, he could see him at the patriarch selection. Shen Jinhua protested that the protagonist was not worthy, but the protagonist with calm mind ignored Jinhua's statement and added that, as he had now gained spiritual vein, he would naturally help his father in the selection, concluding Zhenhua not to lose badly. Shen Jinhua with anger gritted his teeth and wondered what kind of Dan the protagonist took that made him this lucky, and with wicked and mischievous smile thought of dealing with the protagonist, as he had Tianyang slashing axe which was passed on by the elders, mastering it before the selection of patriarch, thinking that it would be easy. Zhenhua with Hua Yunxin left. Hua Yunxin felt unsatisfied at letting the protagonist go unpunished. Shen Xiang also bade farewell, walking towards the door of Spirit Dan Hall, as the people whispered and praised him at mastering true qi at a young age and also in general at the Shen family ability to produce good alchemy seedling. The person from above questioned whether alchemy can be performed by mastering the fire of true qi, and pondered at the countable size of alchemists in the entire South Martial Kingdom. Someone from behind answered that it was still a long way off without a master's guidance. The individual will not be able to make a single pill in his entire life, as making a Dan require the qualifications and resources beyond imaginations. Judging the protagonist as being a rare kind to be able to cultivate the fire of true qi at such a young age to pure level. The person asked the individual behind him, who was the master of the Spirit Dan Pavilion, if he saw the protagonist's talent, and whether he should recruit him. The master not only promptly rejected the idea to recruit the protagonist but also told his assistant to spread the message to all the alchemists in Wohu City not to teach any alchemy lesson to the protagonist, Shen Xiang.